Welcome to Syncreate, a show where we explore the intersections between creativity, psychology, and spirituality. We believe everyone has the capacity to create, and our goal is to demystify the creative process and expand the boundaries of what it means to be creative. We talk with visionaries and change makers and everyday creatives working in a variety of fields and mediums, from the arts to science, technology, and business. We aim to illuminate the creative process from imagination to innovation and everything in between. I'm Melinda Rothaus, and I help individuals and organizations bring their creative dreams and visions to life. At Syncreate, we're here to support your creative endeavors. So if you have an idea for a project or a new venture and you're not sure how to get it off the ground, reach out to us at syncreate.org. Our book, also called Syncreate, walks you through the stages of the creative process so you can take action on your creative goals. We also offer resources, process tools, and coaching to help you bring your work to the world. So, I am delighted today to talk with my new friend, Benjamin Kintisch. Welcome, Benjamin. Glad to have you here today. And
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
yes, I'm thrilled. You're kind of like the perfect person to have on the show because we are talking about creativity, psychology, and spirituality, and we'll find out in just a moment why that is so relevant to you and your work and your story. So for those of you who aren't familiar with your work, Ben is a cantor, chaplain, and music teacher, and he's also the creator of the musical Life Review, the Hospice Musical, which looks at kind of end-of-life issues based on your work as a chaplain and people, people and families involved with hospice, which I think is really wonderful. Looking forward to talking more about that. And of course, you're also a songwriter and performer. So you're the main performer in the musical. And so want to kind of get into that. And I will say, I was really excited to connect with you and talk to you more because I've done some end of work life myself. I'm not a chaplain, but I've done quite a bit of volunteer work with, care teams and people in that stage of life. And I know it's something that a lot of people are kind of afraid of or shy away from, but obviously as a chaplain, you've, gone right into that, and you've found a way through this musical to, bring out the creativity in that and bring the stories to life of different people that you've worked with over the years. So I'm curious, I know you've done a number of other podcasts and you've been talking about the musical and performing across the country, but what have you learned about the creative process, specifically in this context of working with people in hospice as a chaplain and then taking their stories and crafting them into this musical, this show?
So thanks for the question. I think you told the story just fine, and I'll retell it with an eye towards the aha moment, which I think
Please.
is a big moment that you need to pay attention to when you're a creator, right? It's the
Yes.
idea, the spark, and then what do you do with it? So for me, I was a beginner chaplain, training in a chaplaincy program while working as a synagogue cantor in a small town in suburban New Jersey. And I was visiting as part of the hospice chaplain work. You visit patients. I worked at a residential hospice. Shout out to Center for Hope in Scotch Plains and Elizabeth, New Jersey. So I would go to this facility and go room to room visiting with patients. And bedside, part of the work is you sit, you have conversations, hopefully you get some stories. One night driving home, I was calling my wife and I said, I think these stories want to be songs. And she said, get
Yes.
writing. So that night I opened up one of these journal books, the black and white kind we used to have in elementary school.
Uh-huh.
And I started sketching out the first ballad for the project. Now, people ask, like, are they all like biographical sketches? Not really. Some are kind of like thumbnails, some are reflections on a theme. What was happening was I was swimming in the sea of stories. Ooh, that's nice and alliterative. Love
Mhm.
alliteration. But, like, when you're doing many hours of visits a week as part of your training,
Yeah.
even if you're not a songwriter, you're gonna hear some great stories. And most people who are not songwriters or writers of any kind, they I imagine they would hear those stories, enjoy them for, like, the richness of the humanity, but they might not use it as a jumping off point, a source material, as it were. Um,
Exactly.
but for me, it happened that I was a little bit of a songwriter,
Mhm.
you know? So part of it is, I think the first step is believing that you are the creative person who might be up for this task.
Yes, that is
Um,
so important.
as in Yeah, right. So I've checked the internet so far. I'm still the only hospice musical out there. You
So
can check at
far.
the end of this recording to see if I'm still
Yeah.
the only one. Um, but for the time being, I'm the only one, which means that despite the fact that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of hospice facilities and organizations around the world, with all of the people who work for them, I'm assuming tens of thousands of people worldwide
Mhm.
who work for the hospice movement, they all know these stories, but I was the only one who thought, "Oh, these are songs, and those songs are gonna be a musical."
Yeah, that's
So,
such
I
an
guess
important
when
point. It's like seeing the opportunity, right? And then taking action on it.
Yeah, and step 2, um, that's me opening up the journal book and writing.
Yeah.
Step 1 was having the idea, maybe a little bit of encouragement from the spouse helps,
Uh-huh.
um, for sure. And then, in terms of my journey, which, um, should be said, has been about 10 years in the running, nearly a decade now since the first songs were sketched, and we have not yet made it to the Tonys, so we're still working. Um, but that said, like, the joke is a flex on my foolish confidence, or if not foolish, steadfast belief in the project and its worth, which you probably don't feel in the beginning. That probably is earned after months or years with the work, and also having to kind of share it and present it. And I'll get back to that in a second. But, like, I think when it's just you and your journal book or your sketchbook, that sort of early, safe,
Uh-huh.
creative moment,
Yes,
the biggest critic you have to deal with is the internal critic.
for sure.
When I teach songwriting, which I've done at some of these songwriting retreats, I remind people to move the pen or pencil as fast as possible across the page. The reason behind that is a technique is if you move fast enough, you don't have time for the inner critic to tell you that your idea is bad.
You can outrun the inner critic, as it were.
Yeah, I think that's a good
Yeah.
song title, Outrun the
Yeah.
Inner Critic.
Yeah.
Um, when you see, I don't know if you've ever seen these crazy YouTube videos. There's a guy named Harry Mack who's a one of the most impressive rap freestylers out there. So if you're listening and you've never seen him, look it up. He's
Okay, we'll
amazing.
put it in the
So
show
he does
notes,
these
yeah.
videos, and he's like professional level rap freestyler. So he'll go up to
Mhm.
people and say, "Give me 5 hard words," and then he'll do the thing.
Yeah.
So I watch him, and it's, like, very entertaining to me because 'cause I'm a hip hop fan among other genres, and I appreciate the skill of clever rhymes. But
Absolutely.
I also marvel at what is it? Tightrope walker, no net?
Mhm.
I assume that for every video he publishes to YouTube, he records 10 that go, like, pretty good, but they're not
Mhm.
awesome, so he doesn't publish them. That's
Mhm.
fine. We all have the right to, edit and choose what to share.
Exactly,
But I
yeah.
guess I'm just mentioning him because, um, people who do things like I'm thinking jazz
Mhm.
improvisers, I'm thinking the people who paint at a party, like, with the people watching, and
Mhm.
certainly the rap freestyle I just mentioned. They do this thing of creating in front of people, which
Yes.
kind of escalates the pressure and maybe the showmanship to it, because that's part of the show, like, "Ooh, In fact, just the other day, I went and saw a fully improvised musical put
Oh,
on by the Baltimore Musical Improv Group. It was very
love that.
impressive.
I've seen an improv musical here in Austin as well. It's amazing what they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
like, some of the songs are gonna be better than others, but, like,
Sure.
some literally made it up on the spot, so you can't
Yeah.
complain about sophistication, right?
Yeah.
But I as an audience member, I loved it. I'm gonna try to keep dipping my toe in those
You
waters of
should.
improv.
You should.
Fun for me.
I love this because it reminds me actually in a previous episode with Charlotte Gullick, my business partner. We've been doing these mini episodes called Creative Sparks where we kind of riff on one aspect of the creative process. And we had one where she was talking about, in creative work, you have to have this balance between audacity and humility, right? The audacity to do it, to put the pen to paper, to
Mhm.
put yourself out there, but then also the humility to like ask for help, ask for feedback, to collaborate. And I know you've collaborated on this
Yeah,
musical, on the songwriting. So
yeah.
tell us a little bit about that collaborative process.
And you queued it up beautifully with the word humility and partnership. And you
Yes.
need both because you can't I mean, it's hard to imagine if you take the most famous songwriting duos of all time, Lennon-McCartney or Rodgers and
Mhm.
Hammerstein
Mhm.
are 2 that come to mind. Both of those examples, Beatles and old time Broadway, they're regarded as like kings in the field, and yet you can also imagine them having their little push and pull by the piano or by the
Sure.
guitar,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind of a crazy exercise, but I encourage those of you who've ever partnered or wondered what it's like to just think about like it's it's a real dance. I'm
Mhm.
fascinated to imagine John Lennon and Paul McCartney, like, arguing over which lyric works and why, and obviously,
Yes.
they found their way and became one of the great songwriting duos of all time,
Mhm.
um, but they also broke up after 6 years
Right.
or 8
Right.
years, I don't know, but less than a
Collaboration is not
decade.
always easy.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason why the majority of rock bands don't make it to old age like the
Mm.
Stones did. Like, that's
Mhm.
the exception to the rule, mostly because creative artistic people, present guest included, are known to be a little temperamental and sometimes a little bit prickly.
Right.
But with that acknowledgement, know thyself is a good rule
Mhm.
for entering into any partnership, be it creative, marital, romantic, business. So I'll tell a little story to illustrate the point. My
Yes.
I have two main composers on Life Review. I'm the lyricist for all the songs, and I wrote the libretto. Michael Miller of Rochester, New York, and Jason Spiewak of Manhattan and formerly of New Jersey. So Jason and I knew each other first. Michael joined in a few months later. So Jason and I, we had our first successful co-write where basically I'd written the lyrics, shared them with him, and he liked them, wrote up a song at the piano, shared it with me, I think in a voice memo, and I heard it. I was like, oh, this is great. And then we scheduled an in-person co-writing session. So
Uh-huh.
just point of explanation, um, if you're not a songwriter, you might not know some co-writes happen live in person, like
Mhm.
around the piano, like you see in Beautiful, the Carole King musical, which
Mhm.
I just saw a few weeks ago. It was amazing. But in this day and age with internet and email and stuff, a lot of things are done pen pal style.
Sure.
So most of the songs in Life Review, I wrote them first in a journal book in longhand, then edited it in longhand, then typed it for a third draft, then edited that for a fourth draft, and then I would send it off to the composer and then get it
Mhm.
back like a Christmas gift, Sunday morning, unwrap it and hear the song.
That's
Um,
exciting. That's like a little
yeah,
surprise
so
when you get it
that
back.
was really exactly. So when those text messages or emails hit with the completed songs, and this was over a year of back and forth,
Mhm.
one song at a time. I think it might have been nearly 2 years that we were in active co-writing stage, the 3 of us. Yeah, so there was mostly pen pal collaborations. At the recent, songwriting retreat I did my a live collabo with Michael Miller for the first time, and
Uh-huh.
that was fun at the piano. But returning to the partnership story with Jason, our first time live co-writing at the piano,
This is behind the scenes, like, what really
Yeah.
happens in the creative process, what you don't see, right,
Well,
in the finished product.
it's a great way to set it up because I think for those of us who consume creative things, the songs we love on the radio, the books we read, the movies we watch,
Mhm.
it's so easy to forget the number of hours involved,
Yes.
even for something like little or simple as a song.
Mhm.
We are a household that loves Taylor Swift. My wife and I loved her before our 13-year-old daughter fell for her, but we're not competing. Um, but, you know, Taylor is not just a commercial juggernaut. She's a
Mhm.
very, very talented songwriter.
Yeah.
And, haters gonna hate, 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 but, regardless, she's a very, very skilled songwriter, and there's a documentary on Netflix that, I think it's Miss Americana. It's like 5 or 6 years old, but still very relevant, and you see her, and she literally has, books got one on my desk because I usually have one nearby, and it's
Uh-huh.
like, I mean, she might have some that are a little bit fancier than this or whatever,
Journals,
but
yeah.
she's always writing.
Mhm.
Always writing, and I think a lot of songwriters and my mother-in-law, who's a published novelist, often has a pad if she has an idea, maybe less so now, but when she was a bit younger, I think visual artists often travel with sketch pads, and it's not necessarily to, like, flex their muscles the way you have to in art school when you're drawing 100 hands for homework,
Mhm.
but because when you have an idea of an image, you wanna put that down before it
Yeah.
forgets.
You gotta get it down. I use the voice memos, like, on my phone, when I sometimes I wake up with a
Oh, yeah,
musical idea in my head, and it's all about getting it down before you forget, right?
100%. Yes, I've
Yeah.
written several songs about songwriting, and one of them is called "Write It Down, Write It Down, Write It Down."
Yeah.
Um, so the story with Jason Spivak, I'm gonna finish it without interrupting me again. So I brought him this lyric sheet, and I had a feeling that it was a good song. The idea was it was like a kind of a dance number. Remember, the musical is set in hospice care or a hospice facility, so I wanted like an ensemble number. The name of the song was, wait for it, Keep It Orderly. It's like an okay song title. It's meant to be built on a joke about the word orderly, like the orderlies who keep the place clean.
Mhm.
What Jason pointed out was one, I repeated the punchline at least 10 or 20 times in the song. And he's like, the punchline isn't that funny because no one uses the word orderly. Am I right? He's like,
Right.
that's a word from old movies.
Right.
And I was like, you're right. But then I kind of went, "Hmm." And I was like totally crestfallen. And he said, hey, and he sort of like got to a scoldy tone that I didn't expect. I was like, what? And he's like, dude, we're partners. This is a trusting relationship. You have to trust that when I sit down at this piano with your lyric sheet, if it's good, I'm going to write a song. And if it's not good, I'm going to say, to quote him, this isn't it. Now, this isn't it doesn't mean you wasted your time
Right.
or you're a bad songwriter. It's just, it doesn't, to use his phrase, when it's good, it rings the bell. That one did not ring the
Mhm.
bell.
Mhm.
But he said, let's look in the book for something else. And he said, do you have your book with you? And I was like, yeah. And he
No.
kind of thumbed through it. Yeah, exactly. I was still busy, with my sadness. And he said, okay, what about this one? And we looked at it. I was like, oh yeah, I think that's, and he's like, no, I think there's something there. Now, it turned out that what he found, the main heart of it was, quote, only a stanza, or maybe it was like one verse and one chorus.
Mhm.
So it was like not fully complete, but he saw it had the heart of a good song. And he's like,
Yeah.
could you write another verse for it? Right. But he's like, that's good. And it turned out it ended up being an anthem of our show. That's the second song. It's sort of like the theme song of hospice care that explains what the philosophy of hospice care is.
Yeah.
And it's part of what makes it good is it was written inspired by the words of the founder of the modern hospice movement. Her name was Dame Cicely Saunders. She was a British nurse who cared for World War II veterans. And because of medical advances, the soldiers weren't dying as fast as they did in World War One.
Mhm.
So there was this new problem. The advent of modern hospice care coincided with the post-war era of people grievously injured but not dead. And then,
Wow.
like, what do we do with these people who are not immediately dying, but we're not actually actively trying to save their life? We're trying to make them comfortable.
Yes.
So at the time of war, it might be someone with a serious infection that
Mhm.
can't be reversed. You don't wanna just, like, leave him, so you
Of
wanna make sure
course.
that his pain is managed, his symptoms are managed, and so forth. Nowadays, because much of hospice care is far removed from the battlefield, we think of it primarily in terms of cancer
Yeah.
Parkinson's and, degenerative diseases or that kinda stuff.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, but the story about Jason is is important on a couple levels. One, in a partnership, you have to go into it knowing that you're a little bit vulnerable
Yes.
and ready to move through the vulnerable spaces with
Mhm.
someone liking or not liking your stuff, or maybe
Mhm.
liking part of it, but not liking the other thing.
Yeah.
If you can't handle that proposition, you should be a solo writer, and that's okay. The world is not demanding you to co-write.
True.
Uh, and honestly, um, the apocryphal story of the bad song with Jason, I've told it now many times because I think it he helped me get through a very important moment as songwriter, which is not every song you write is good.
Right. And
Even
you
Taylor
can't be
Swift, I'm sure,
attached.
guarantee it, as even though some critics said her new album was bloated because it's like a double album,
Right.
28 tracks,
Right.
guarantee that woman wrote at
Right.
least 50 songs in advance of that album.
Yeah.
I mean, she has 30 songs written by Taylor Swift that Taylor Swift and her people decided need to go in a drawer. I
Mhm.
mean, maybe someday she'll release it as a vault track. It's not like the effort will be wasted.
Yes. And that is so important because and we actually just talked about this in an episode that came out this week with Chris McKenna. It's, he was talking about screenwriters and how do you get to be a great screenwriter? Well, you've written a lot of screenplays
Mm,
before the one that maybe actually gets produced, right? So it's so much about time in, right? And be consistently writing or doing whatever your creative practice is. And then around the collaboration piece, I think another thing that you're highlighting here is the importance of having that trust and also not being attached, so attached to your work that you can't
mm.
take feedback, right? And incorporate it and be flexible enough to try different things, knowing that if you've got a trusted collaborator, they're trying to help you make it better, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you have to have a sense of trust and common purpose. You
Mhm.
know, Jason signed on to the project and then subsequently Michael because they liked the idea of it.
Yeah,
Um, I think they both had some experiences with older people in their life who had dealt with end of life issues as
sure.
old people do.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and then once we were kind of on board together, we had that aligned purpose. I wanted to share a different story about feedback, if I may, because
Sure.
this one is funnier. Um, so I'm a theater maker, and part of being a theater maker, I've come to learn along the way, is this process called workshopping.
Yes.
And, I'm sure plenty of your people know, but I'm an over explainer. So in the theater world, a workshop is like a small production. For
Mhm.
instance, the actors might have binders rather than memorize a script, or maybe just a piano, not a pit orchestra, maybe no costumes. So in the real Broadway world, they do workshops for producers, but even outside of Broadway, all over the country, when someone's launching a play, before they can stand it up for real, they often
Mhm.
do a workshop. So I've done 2 workshops of life review with a
Okay.
cast. One was back, 8 months before the pandemic. It was at a national education conference, and that was, sort of a cabaret or concert style performance, 10 songs with narration. We had about 100 people in the audience. It was well received. And then because it was a conference, I was able to find people like, they see me and be like, "Oh, Ben, I saw your show." And then I'd say, "Can I sit and ask you some
Yeah.
questions?"
Like a little focus
Because
group.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally focus group of 1, and
Yeah.
maybe I had 5 or 7 of these conversations.
Mhm.
They were so helpful.
Yes.
I also, for that show, I believe, had a handout where people could give some little comments, which I gathered and looked at. And there was some very specific feedback from the first workshop. 100%, and no one ever agrees on everything.
Of course.
100% of the audience hated one part of my plot.
Right, so you know you're onto something there, right?
That is a
Yeah.
powerful data point, right?
Yes.
100% of people not related to me who had not
Uh-huh.
written the project all agreed that the chaplain should not fall in love with the nurse.
Right.
Because who needs a love story? Now, as a novice playwright, I was like, well, a love story keeps it moving and keeps it interesting.
Right, right.
No one liked it. 0 people.
Okay.
Now that news, because it was delivered lovingly in those interviews, along with a
Mhm.
lot of kind words and in the
Sure.
papers, like, it didn't hurt me, and I wasn't you talked about being wedded to your idea, too
Right.
invested. I
Mhm.
wasn't too invested in that idea, so I was like, "Okay, cut it." So 5 months later, I had a staged version, or not staged, but a more robust version with local community theater talent. We had a few rehearsals. It was like lightly staged. So, okay, I'm going to stand over here. I'm going to move back that way, but no scenery, but for a rather flimsy bed.
Uh-huh.
Um, we invited, risky as it was, question and answer from the
Uh-huh.
audience. And,
Uh-huh.
question and answer is sometimes delivered in the form of a diatribe or a
Sure.
lengthy opinion piece.
Yeah.
Older gentleman gets to the mic. He's our first questioner, and he just goes, "It's too long." And then he sits down.
Okay.
And without skipping a beat, I lean into my microphone and I say, "Thank you, sir. Please be sure to put that on the comments card. Next question, please." You're like, what the hell can I say to that?
Right.
Like,
Right.
and I was very exhausted. I had an ensemble cast supporting me, but I have cast myself in the biggest role, the
Yeah.
lead, the chaplain guy. So
Yeah.
I was pooped. And I was like, I did not want to hear you tell me that everything I'd worked hard for was too long. However, with time and distance, I came to
Yes.
realize he was right.
Right.
There were some parts where the dialogue was dragging,
Mhm.
and also it was reminded to me that because it was an unstaged workshop, there was no visual. If you think
Right.
about going to the
Mhm.
theater or even your local community theater, you expect some basics,
Yep.
some movement, some costumes, some lighting,
Yep.
some props, some scenery, at least some boxes, but often some flats or flies. I had none of that. So visually, it was rather static.
Yep.
I imagine myself as an audience member today with this understanding. I might be bored after 220. Also, the guy was a little bit older. Maybe he had to pee. I don't know. But that's feedback. By the way, my 2 best friends in the area, shout out to Lou and Dave if you're listening. They bring this up all the time. Sometimes they'll be seeing me, we'll hang out, and they'll be like, "Hey, Benny boy, it's too long." It's just like
Right.
it's our
Right.
it's our little inside joke. My friends are at the performance and they have not stopped repeating it. So
Yeah.
that's my funny story about feedback.
I think this is another really important point about incorporating feedback. You said after some time passed, then you were able to
Yes.
kinda, you could take a step back, and sometimes it's hard to receive the feedback right after a performance, right? And you have to sit
Yeah,
with
I
it and
don't think
go
I'm
like,
gonna do that again.
is this like, okay, is there a kernel of truth to this? And like, with a little time and space, then you can meaningfully incorporate the feedback. Maybe not right in the
Right.
moment. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah,
sorry, go
I
on.
think so. I've spoken about this on a lot of shows, especially those that deal with the creative process.
Mhm.
I'm sitting here with my laptop on a desk, and to my right is a drawer. It's a literal drawer, but it can also be a metaphorical drawer. And you always have a choice to take what you've done and put it in a drawer.
Yes.
In
Yes.
fact, one of the important pivots for my project happened during COVID when um you couldn't do the ensemble
Yeah.
show and I had to pivot. And I had this difficult conversation with a wonderful creative coach named Alex Palting. And she said, "Ben, you basically have a choice. You can put this project in a drawer and leave it there until the world is safe for live theater. And we don't know if that's going to be 6 months or a year or 2 years or
Right.
dot, dot, dot." And none of us knew, remember?
Mhm. For sure.
The choice was to put it in a drawer or
Mhm.
do a pivot to make it
Yes.
usable online. And
Right.
so what Alex suggested is, if you wanna try, let's pivot. And what we came up with was condensing it, taking a show that was 2 hours and 20 minutes, smushing it down to be 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Instead of 16 songs, 8 songs, instead of dialogue, narration, and that's how you get a one-man show that I can perform from this space.
Yes.
Um, and once that was done, it was tricky to write, but once I figured it out through the magic of digital piano accompaniment, I could
Uh-huh.
and, I play 2 songs live on guitar, the rest is digital piano, bloop. Um, that means I can roll out of bed, so to speak,
Mhm.
and perform from this. Performing on camera during COVID, a one-man show, I hated it. And sometimes, here's another creative lesson. Sometimes when you're working with someone helping you along your journey, they tell you ideas about how to pivot or how to try something new, and you do not like it at all.
No. No.
It took multiple expensive coaching sessions. This, if
Yes.
you work with a good coach, you pay for it. And I don't know if she was secret. I don't No, she was not being sneaky about it, but I was hard to convince, and it took several sessions, and she said,
Sure.
"What if we just try it? And what if
Exactly.
we find one low stakes gig?" So we identified my synagogue where I worked as a place
Mhm.
that would do a virtual blah blah blah.
Mhm.
And because I was nervous about the tech, I hired a tech guy just for that gig. Now I do streaming like it's no big deal, but for that one,
Mhm.
it felt like I needed someone on hand just in case.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be, I mean, in retrospect, it's obvious because everyone who wanted to do something at that time streamed and did new
Yes.
versions of whatever, right? But at the time,
But making
we were
that
all kind of making it up.
adjustment,
What?
yeah, it's a big adjustment, it's a big transition, and again, you have to be willing to have the flexibility when the circumstances require it to
Yeah.
try something different.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to report that not only did it kind of save me and the project, or that's a little dramatic, but it kept the project going nicely throughout COVID, along with many podcast appearances.
Yeah.
Um, but it also helped me, an important part of being a creator is creating and then sharing. So
Yes.
I was more or less done with the project, and so there was no new creating to get my juices flowing. So sharing it, even though I had to perform for this white dot,
Mhm.
those people who have learned to make really good eye contact with the white dot, it's a skill, right? But eventually you get used to it,
Mhm.
especially if it's the only show that you can do.
Yeah.
So I did some gigs that were for small gatherings. I did one where a large elder care facility, and they piped it in through their internal cable system, so hundreds of rooms, people in bed got to see my show. Um, and I did a death conference. Yes, there are conferences about
Wow.
everything. So a death and dying conference
Yeah.
did in London. So I
Uh-huh.
appeared internationally, virtually, but that still feels exciting. And
Absolutely.
and it's also, another thing that, while we're sharing advice for fellow creators, the virtual stuff at the time was the only thing I could do. Now it's a COVID keeper, right? Like, if I meet
Sure.
someone and they don't have the budget to fly me out to California, I say,
Mhm.
"Well, for X numbers of dollars plus travel and hotel, I can come to you in person. But if we can't
Mhm.
do that, similar fee, a little bit reduced, and then no travel expense for me to perform through the computer."
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna lowball myself too much, but
Mhm.
it's a nice flexible option, and it saves people on travel.
For sure.
Um, and honestly, prior to COVID, I would have been like, "Hell no, I'm not gonna be
Mhm.
performing my show through the computer."
Mhm.
But now that I know I can do it, and
But we're
and
here
great,
today doing this through the computer. I mean, it's opened up a lot of new possibilities,
a
right?
lot of new possibilities, and there's the phrase that I've been saying a lot in the last few days, "Hey, you never know."
Yeah.
So I think it's a good one for a t-shirt, like for optimism, and
Mhm.
it's good for opening up the book and letting the pencil or the pen move across the page. Hey, you never know what your creativity will unleash once you let the pen go.
Yes. You're involved with, I think, putting together and participating in these annual songwriting retreats. And so, just given our limited time, what is kind of the best thing to come out of those retreats, getting together with a bunch of other songwriters? And, you kind of explained to me how, you have different prompts or different like group
Sure.
activities. So like, what's the best thing to come out of that songwriting retreat?
Well, the community of people who want to be there is the reason why you go to the place in isolation of real life. I mean, I think
Yes.
that's the essence of a retreat. You go to a pretty
Mhm.
location, hopefully it's pretty,
Yep.
and with a common purpose of creating, and then with some teachers, or in our case, teachers and cooperative teaching, you can do the thing. But I think being away from real life is
Yes.
important because the majority of us are not like aforementioned Taylor Swift. If she wants to just spend some time writing, she can afford it.
Mhm.
And I imagine she schedules it in her life as part of her craft.
Yeah.
Those of us who are not currently making a living at our creative endeavor,
Mhm.
we typically create here and there, nights, weekends,
Exactly, yeah.
when it occurs to us. Some friends at this retreat, they tell me, like, I only write songs once a year at this thing. But it's
Yeah.
worth it for them because it their soul happy. For others like
Yeah.
me, it's a major boost. So I mentioned I did the live co-write with my friend Mike in person.
Mhm.
Um, we also have we have prompts where we're given a task by ourselves in a group. We have song swaps which are kind of like open mics where everyone a song shares,
Yeah.
where everyone can share a song.
Uh-huh.
And we also have something called My Two Shekels, which is like the Jewish version of My Two Cents, which
Yeah.
is a song share with the expectation that you're inviting feedback.
Right.
So the meta answer, and I know I answered with a lot of words, is you go to a retreat to create in an environment full of similarly motivated people, and that's
Yes.
super exciting.
Totally. Yeah, beautiful. And then I want to kind of end with, you also teach music and creativity to kids, and we haven't touched on that
That's right.
as much yet, but you're in a music classroom, and when we were chatting leading up to this, you were kind of describing to me, some of those scenarios with the kids. And so I'm curious because, part of what we're trying to do in this show is demystify the creative process and reveal that everyone has the capacity to be creative. So, how do you teach creativity and music? Like, what's your sort of teaching approach or philosophy?
So honestly, teaching creative stuff is a lot easier with kids.
Yeah.
I was just describing the songwriting retreat. So I teach
Uh-huh.
songwriting to others there for a brief moment within the retreat.
And
So do
that's mostly
others.
adults,
Um,
right?
that's adults, right?
Yeah.
Right, and that's a cooperative aspect that we're all teaching one another. Some do
Mhm.
guitar, some do poetry, whatever. Um, they are eager, but the adults, even those who are self-identified songwriters, real aspiring
Mhm.
future current songwriters,
Mhm.
they're inclined to create, but they have this loud inner critic that I
Yes.
alluded to
Yep.
earlier,
Yep.
who wants to tell them to slow down, who wants to tell them to edit.
Mhm.
Kids don't have that.
Mhm.
Kids are used to creating. And actually, I should qualify that. Many kids have a smaller inner critic. You
Yeah.
meet children as early as kindergarten, even pre-K, who will start doing work, decide it's not how they hoped, and then destroy their paper.
Yeah.
My daughter, who's now 13, is a talented visual artist. She was one of those kids when she was younger, she would draw in pencil and erase so much, the paper would eventually have a hole
Oh
in it.
gosh. Yeah.
And one summer, which suggests, a terribly powerful inner critic
Yeah.
saying, "It's not right, it's not right, it's not right."
Right.
One summer when she was, like, 8 or 9, she did an art camp, and they made them draw in Sharpie or a ballpoint pen.
Oh, so you can't erase.
You can't erase, and you learn to make mistakes and work through it.
Yeah.
When you watch painters on the internet or whatever on the street, you notice because it's paint, they can't really erase, they just keep working through it. And when I teach Um, adults, I have to spend more time reminding them to keep going. With children, the harder thing is to contain the activity
Uh-huh.
in the
And the
amount of time.
energy.
So I'm a specials teacher. I have the little ones for 30 minutes. Most children are more ready to create because
Yep.
it's what they do all the time.
And they haven't yet received the messages that, well, you're not good at that, or you need to do something practical, or, all these negative messages that we get, they're still open.
100%. As an adult, mostly because I had a child who ended up loving art, I,
Mhm.
in my 30s and now my 40s, play in art a lot.
Beautiful.
Um, it's not to sell anything in a gallery. It's
Right.
mostly to get my mind going so that then I can shift to sitting down with the book. I've
Yeah.
actually done that as a workshop at previous years of the songwriting retreat where we do
Mhm.
some art stuff and then I do a song prompt. And the idea in the same way that an athlete does like jumping jacks and touching their toes to
Uh-huh.
warm up, a songwriter can get their creative stuff going by creating in a different domain. And I
Yes.
actually
I
think it may
love
be
that.
even more effective than
Mhm.
a language-based warm up because
Yes.
when you're a songwriter, you live in words all the damn time. I
Yeah.
mean, I've never met a songwriter who doesn't relate to that feeling of hearing rhymes or thinking of
Sure.
song titles. That's why we're
Sure.
songwriters.
Yeah.
Um, but playing in a new, sandbox, so to speak, I'm looking just beyond the laptop. I have within reach a whole bunch of colored pencils. I
Yes.
don't typically color during meetings, but, like, if I need to, they're there.
Yeah.
Uh and I encourage all
Yeah.
of you listening to play in some mediums where you're bad or not bad, novice.
Yes.
Maybe look up a local class, or if you like learning through the internet, find a YouTube, beginner art teacher,
Yeah.
whatever the medium. I find drawing and visual arts accessible for an adult brave enough to start because
Yes.
even in doing something like collage,
Yeah.
collage is wonderful, or decoupage, which is like collage with extra shiny glue.
Yeah.
Um, you almost can't mess it up.
Yeah. Something
And
visual, though. Yeah, and I love that. And so we usually kind of end each episode with a creativity pro tip, and I think that's a beautiful one that you just articulated. If you're a songwriter and you're getting ready to, do a session of writing, try experimenting first with some visual art or whatever your medium is. Maybe get your juices flowing with another art form that is kind of maybe more low stakes for you, and then move into your kind of primary process. I love
yeah,
that. So, well, we are at time. It's flown by, but thank you so much, Ben. I know there's so much more to talk about, so maybe we'll have to do a follow-up at some point, but really appreciate you coming on the show today. So thank you so much. And if people want to learn more about the musical or about your work, how can they find you?
sure. Thanks so much again for the opportunity to be on this great program.
For sure.
The musical again is called Life Review, the Hospice Musical. Our website is lifereviewmusical.com, lifereviewmusical.com,
Okay.
and Instagram at Life Review Musical, same spelling, all one word.
Perfect.
I'm really active on Instagram, so if you message me, I will totally write you back. And on the website, if you're curious to hear and see more about the project, we have some clips of performances as well as links to a ton of podcasts. So if
Okay.
today's yammer has not been enough Ben Kintish for you, there's a lot more available.
Yeah, you're out there on the internet, which is so awesome. So,
I'm trying, it's a little
yeah.
bit of throwing I love. I'm always in metaphors. It's throwing the bottle into the ocean.
Mhm, and
Someone's gotta
seeing
find
where
one
it
eventually,
washes
so
up. Yeah, I love that. So, thanks again to Ben Kintish for being on the show today. Find and connect with us at syncreate.org. And we're on all the major podcast platforms as well as YouTube and social media under Syncreate. We're now on Patreon as well. And if you enjoy the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. We're recording today at Record ATX Studios in Austin with Ben Kintish coming in from Maryland. Thank you again. And the show is produced in collaboration with Mike Osborne at 14th Street Studios. Thanks so much for being with us, and see you next time.